Hello, friends. Welcome to this discussion and demonstration on cloud based geoprocessing for public health applications. My name is Prasun Kumar Gupta and I am with the Indian Institute of Remote Sensing. Let us first discuss what is cloud computing. Cloud computing is defined as on demand availability of computer system resources without direct active management of the user. This means that a user, a end user, can have access to any computing resources that he wants. So, for example, you all are probably using a computing device already. It could be your desktop, it could be your laptop, even your mobile device is a computing device. What cloud computing refers to is computing resources without having to physically directly manage it. For example, you will never have to, when using cloud computing, you will never have to purchase, install, manage any kind of hardware, any kind of processors, hard disk, storage, RAM, network, etc. etc. So, a very nice acronym has been given by Penn State, which says cloud computing basically deals with five characteristics. First is N for network access. That means you can have access to a cloud computer or cloud computing whenever you are connected to a network. That means any device which is connected to a network. It could be a server, it could be a desktop, it could be a mobile, tablet, anything which connects to the internet can access a cloud computing resource. Second, on demand self service. That means the user can himself self service, as in the word, he can go to a portal and get the amount of computing resources he requires as and when required, that is on demand. He doesn't need to talk to anybody or contact anybody or talk or call anybody to install his hardware or anything. A user can directly go to a web portal, click on a few options and get the required amount of computing resources that he wants. Third is R or resource pooling. This is very important from both the perspectives, from the user and the provider. What resource pooling means is that there'll be hundreds of servers. These could be across different continents, and your application, your software, your data will get copied or mirrored in real time across different servers. Now, when you are trying to access a specific data set or a software, the uh, the system decides which is the fastest way to get the resource to you. It could be the server near you, or it could be a server 1,000 kilometers away because the nearest server is down or the network connectivity is poor. So, the cloud computing itself decides how to give the appropriate amount of resource to the user. Now, for example, you are also running a 4 gigabit machine on a cloud computer and you want to increase it to 16 gigabit or higher. So, you just change a few options. It is on demand. So, you go on a portal, you change a few options, click on submit, and additional amount of RAM gets given to you. Now, this new RAM need not be in the same system or same physical server. It can be anywhere. The management software, the cloud computing software, automatically gives the required amount of resource to the user. This is called resource pooling. The fourth and one of the most important characteristics of cloud computing is elasticity. Before I explain, let me give you a very good example of elasticity, which is the IRCTC ticketing website. You know that during the Tatkal booking, the load on the servers goes very high up. So it is not feasible for them to maintain hundreds and thousands of servers only to manage that peak that they get at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. So what they do is they elastically, that means on as and when required, they increase the resources to manage the incoming load and then decrease it back to maintain the regular load. So that is what cloud computing offers you. It allows you to elastically increase or decrease the amount of resources available, uh, so as to manage the incoming demand from the end users. And finally, all this cloud computers are measured services. That means you pay as you go. You only pay for the amount of resource that you will be using. It could be in terms of the amount of bandwidth you are using, the amount of hard disk you are using, and the amount of processing power you are using, and so on. So these are all measured, and it is very low if you have a very low requirement, and these can go very high if you do not control how much amount of resources you want to dedicate to this. Now, cloud computing is offered to users as services. You do not go to a company and say, "I need a cloud computer." You generally buy and services from these companies. So let's say Google is offering Google Cloud services, Amazon is offering Amazon Web Services or Elastic Compute Cloud services, and there are many other companies, Rackspace and all that. So what you do is you go to these websites and you look for services. Now, cloud computing is offered primarily as infrastructure as a service. That means you can go to these websites, go to these companies, and procure virtual machines. So these are basically like physical machines, but you don't have to physically have it in your office or campus. It is available online to you. You can install your software, you can store your data, you can run your application, you can run your models, you can host your website, you can put data in the database, and you can, since it is all network accessed, you can access it from anywhere. So that is called infrastructure as a service. There, only the resources are managed by the company. The rest of the things are managed by the users. That means installing the softwares and installing the OS, installing the runtime, the data, and the software. All this is managed by the users. But let's say you have a specific uh, software to run a data to store. So what you are looking at is platform as a service. You don't need to worry about whether which version of Windows I want to install, where will I get the license, and all that. So you buy what is known as platform as a service. You just say, I want a Windows machine with i7 processors, let's say 3 gigahertz of processing power, 32 GB of RAM, 500 gigs of hard disk, and a platform is offered to you as a service. There, you only need to manage the data, the software that you need to put on it. You do not need to manage the operating system, you do not need to manage the runtime environment. Also, the underlying hardware, such as storage, processors, and networks, you need not manage. Classical examples of platform as service are web servers and database servers. So, for example, Oracle is a very big database company. They are offering Oracle Cloud, which is basically a ready made environment of an Oracle database. All you need to do is purchase a cloud instance and then upload your data to that database, which is being managed by Oracle itself. The last type of services that you buy would be software as a service. Uh, Here, the vendor, the company you're buying it, manages everything. That is your physical devices, that is network, storage, processors. On top of it, the operating system, the runtime, and even the software that you're purchasing. For example, uh, Amazon offers a virtual machine with ArcGIS pre-installed, so they are managing the physical hardware, the operating system, even the software. A very popular example is Google Docs. You have Google Docs on your mobile phone, on your laptops. You just open it and you start typing your Word document or editing your Word document. You don't know, or you don't have to worry about where, on what machine it is running, who is managing the operating system, who's managing the software, and all that. and of course the most popular gaming today, PUBG. All these games which are played across the world are managed on clouds. It is not physically possible that a game or a application which is used by multiple thousands, millions of users across the world is there in one single server. It is not possible. So what cloud computing offers you the benefit is that these are distributed computers across the world which are connected to each other. They use advanced concepts like content delivery networks and all that, where the data is getting mirrored in real time across different servers. Even if one server goes down, your data is preserved in multiple locations, and all this is offered to you in a very secure environment. Not even the companies, the vendors have access to the data that you are putting in. A lot of times people have this doubt that I have to put my data on somebody else's machine. Is there a uh, is there a chance of a leak, or is there a chance of pilferage of this data? What cloud computing companies say or offer is that the data is very secure and it is very safe, and that even the companies cannot, if they even if they wish, they cannot access the data because it is all encrypted and stored in their servers. Now when we talk about the geospatial domain, the GIS domain, we are talking about Earth observation data. Now, Earth observation satellites, or satellites in the sky which are taking images of the Earth, it is around 40 years now that the data is available. The initial Landsat satellites, the Landsat 1 series, started taking images in 1972. And all this 40 years of, and it has been increasing throughout the years. Uh, there are a host of Indian remote sensing satellites. There are a host of satellites by the US, the European Union, Japanese, Australians. All these companies have satellites in the space, and they are all offering data publicly, freely on their own websites or on their portals. Now, this amounts to now zettabytes of data, not even terabytes, not even petabytes. We are talking about zettabytes of data. Now, how does the user access the correct data for his area, for his application, in a finite amount of time? If you try exploring all this, it will take infinite amount of time. So initially, when the data set was low, when we had only Landsat and MODIS, what we were basically looking at was the data port, the user or the EO analyst accessing the data portal, downloading the data, pre-processing, analyzing it, making maps which were either hard copy maps or web-based maps, and then giving the end user access to it. But now what is happening is we have moved to a newer way of delivering accessing data, which is that the data provider, that the people who are collecting the data, they are pre-processing it, they are making it analysis ready. That is the keyword which is hot these days in Earth observation domain. We are talking about ARD, that is analysis ready data. We don't have to worry about geometric corrections, radiometric corrections, cloud in the data and all that. All that is removed. The data is made perfectly ready for analysis, stacked together and stored in a cloud based environment or a computing environment, where the EO analyst, that is the guy who is analyzing the data, can also access the data. The end user, if he wants, also can access the data. And this area which is shown like a cloud is where all the data is kept, where the users can select the data, analyze the data, and portray the results. Now, to do all this, there is a huge ecosystem of softwares and solutions available. If you talk about the bottom of the pyramid, the actual data infrastructure, it is offered by these cloud companies like AWS, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and so on. On top of that, Earth observation data is kept. These are offered by mainly public organizations like USGS, the European Space Agency, ISRO, and so on. On top of that, you have the algorithms that you want to run on it. These could be taken from ArcGIS or QGIS. Then you want to do processing or computation. You could do it using any desktop software or cloud-based software like Google Earth Engine, which is highlighted in red as GEE. If you want your own solutions, open source, and if you're looking for open source solutions where you have developer with you who want to optimize open source code and use it for your application, then there's Open Data Cube, Hadoop, GeoSpark, GeoMesa. These are all very popular these days. And finally, all this ecosystem is used for different applications. It could be for environmental change, urban facilities, and even public health. So, as I said, there are multiple cloud based solutions available. Some of them are made by private companies, some of them are made by public organizations, government funded. Some of them have global data, and some of them have data coverage which is restricted to their country or to their region. And all of them have the different access policies. Some products are freely open to you. That means, for example, Google Earth Engine is free to access. You can create an account and directly access it. Amazon Web Services is a paid service. You have to pay and get those services. Then there are multiple solutions like Earth Server, EODC, NASA, Earth Exchange, and Swiss Data Cube. These are for their own. These are, let's say, for their own beta users. This is a closed user group. Then we have the Australian Geoscience Open Data Cube. I think they have renamed it to Digital Earth Australia Data Cube. It is an open source code. Anybody in the world can download the code, run it, and have their own solution on their private network also if you want. And finally, the existing desktop softwares are also going cloud based. For example, ArcGIS is now being offered as ArcGIS Online, which is a cloud based equivalent of the desktop ArcGIS software. So there are multiple cloud based solutions. Today, we will focus on Google Earth Engine because it has a lot of data and it has the power of all the Google servers, and it is currently being offered free. So before I go into details of Earth Engine, let me just show you two, three examples of how Earth Engine is being used currently in public health applications. And these have been there for a long time, and a lot of work has been done on these. The biggest project which I found while preparing for this session is Malaria Atlas project. This was in fact founded somewhere around 2006. Although Earth Engine was not there, but that time, but then they moved on their entire infrastructure, their entire code on this Earth Engine platform. Here you have things like malaria incidences, endemicity, mosquito distribution, and so on. And this is a project by the World Health Organization and University of Oxford. So if you wish to explore this page, you can go to this URL given at the bottom of the slide, malariaatlas.org, and here you can explore all these data. You can analyze them region wise, and even probably run some small models on this platform itself. The next one is by some researchers in Harvard and Columbia University in the US. They have made this Earth Engine app called Smoke Policy Tool, which basically models and projects the impact of Indonesian fires on public health in equatorial Asia for 2005 to 2029 based on land use, land cover classification, fire emission, and meteorological data. So here you can, there are sliders and drop downs. You can specify which scenario year you're looking at, which meteorological year do you want to give, what kind of receptors you want, what kind of emissions you want to add or remove, and then finally find its impact on the public health of different nearby countries and mortality and so on. So this is also a very nice application. The you can view, this is also open source, so you can the code is open source. They have made their code available at this link, sites.google.com, /view/smoke policy tool/home, and you can modify it according to your models or your study area, and change the tool accordingly. The last application that I want to show is still in development. I think this is not in active development. Somebody made this at NASA and they have kept it on GitHub. This is called the interactive model of mosquito distribution. This is primarily focused on Western Europe. So this is the Western Europe Health and Air Quality team has created this open source interactive mosquito habitat suitability modeling application to assist with vector-borne diseases in Western Europe. And they use the maximum entropy or maxent algorithm to visualize how Earth observations and citizen science mosquito observances predict suitable habitat for mosquitoes. So one thing that I forgot to tell you is that in Earth Engine, not only Earth observation is data is there, some vector data files are also there, that is points and polygons. Also, you can upload your own files on this portal to view your data and to interact your data. Let's say you have occurrences points and you want to view what is the Earth observation parameters at those locations. So that kind of facility is also offered by Earth Engine, and we will see a glimpse of it in the demonstration at the end of this slide. So this is also application uh, which you can have a look at. So coming to the main application on which, or main software on which all these is built on, the Earth Engine software, which is provided by Google. You have all these data available: Landsat, Sentinel, their raw products, the top of atmosphere, their surface reflectances, then modest data, different elevation or terrain, different land covers, atmospheric data, temperature, precipitation, NDVI, and all this data is available from the beginning of these sensors till the most recent day, in some cases as less than 1 or 2 days from today, or 1 or 2 days behind today. So this was one of the older slides. Then they were saying that then they are getting 4,000 new images per day, but I think these numbers have updated. I found in a recent presentation that they state that they have more than 27 petabytes of Earth observation data on their platform. Now all this data is there on Earth Google servers, and they have thousands of servers. Maybe you've seen some videos on YouTube that they have huge uh, warehouses filled with servers, and they're all interconnected to each other, and you can use all this server processing power on Earth Engine, and it is available to you currently free of cost. So what does it look like? It looks like it is just a web based thing. You don't need to install anything. Once you start Earth Engine, in your browser you see an interface like this. On the left hand side, it says scripts. That means uh, all your programs are stored here. You also can see some documentation. If you click on the docs tab, you can upload your own files. It could be rasters, that means satellite data or any images on this assets tab, or you can also upload your point data. Let's say you have some text files or Excel files or shape files. All that can also be uploaded in this assets tab. Then this is where you write, this is the code editor. This is where you write your JavaScript code. You'll need to know a little bit of JavaScript, but the developer documentation is very good, and very good examples are given. Most of the time, you will just copy that example, change the product or change the study area, and run it for your application. On the right hand side, you have the console. Here, whatever you use print, the output will come here, or you will see some graphs if you are creating some graphs in your code. And then if you're downloading some data from Earth Engine, that facility is also there. That will come under this tasks tab. If you want to view your results on the Google Map directly, This is the map display at the bottom. uh, the results can be viewed directly here also. All these panes are resizable, so you can click on these dividers and move left and right, bottom and top, to change the sizes. So probably you've seen this slide already. I just wanted to show it to you again. All these different products are available on Earth Engine. So, for example, this NO2, nitrogen dioxide concentration from Sentinel 5P satellites are available. Rainfall data for as long as old as 38 years is also available on Earth Engine. This animation has been made. This basically tells about how the monsoon onset happens in the country. So if you look at this month here, so around April, it starts from northeast India, and then by June, July, it has covered the entire country, and then September, October, it starts receding, and by November, the rainfall is monsoon has left India. This image on the bottom shows the land surface temperature, or basically temperature if you wish, in the country, and it is from January to May of this year itself, 2020. And here you see how it ranges from less than 20 degrees to over 40-45 degrees in a span of 5 months. So that is what I wanted to give you an overview of. Now let us dive directly into Earth Engine. You will first need to sign up into Earth Engine. So I'll share a link with you at the end of this demonstration on how where you can sign up. And once you sign up, you will need to go to this web page called code.earthengine.com, where you can type or run your programs and get your outputs. This is the interface that we will be working on. As I told you, you have the code editor here, the programs listed here, the console output will come here, and the map display comes here. So I'll be sharing the link to the code that will be working today. This is the code that we will be working with today. I will just expand this area so that you can see the code, and I will try to explain as much as I can in this short time. So we'll be using with basically two data sets. One, I told you we'll be working with the Sentinel 5P nitrogen dioxide concentration data that they give. Then we'll also be using the NCEP NCAR reanalysis surface temperature data, and we will see how we can display all this data on the map and how we can download it in form of maps or in form of graphs. So I will in the meantime also open GIS software so that we can see the GIS data that we are downloading. So the first thing that I want to do, is basically show you how the nitro. You have seen a lot of media reports of during the lockdown, the air pollution has gone down, and people are seeing the Himalayas and all that. So let us actually see from satellite data whether the pollution has gone down. So we one parameter of pollution that we are referring to today is nitrogen dioxide. This is a common gas available in the atmosphere, but due to increased car emissions and industrial emissions, the amount increases in the tropospheric layer. So there is data which is provided by Sentinel 5P, which is the tropospheric nitrogen dioxide density, which is basically the amount of nitrogen dioxide for volume uh, as compared to a ratio of the nitrogen dioxide volume versus the total air volume in the column, in the atmospheric column. So what we are going to do is take this NO2 data from Sentinel 5P. I am going to select this specific band, which is the tropospheric nitrogen dioxide. I am going to filter it for the first fortnight of April, that is first 15 days of or 14 days of April, and I am going to average all these layers and create one image. I am naming it as a variable NO2 April first fortnight. I am doing the same thing for May and June. I am just changing the dates from April to June, May and to June. Then I am adding all these layers. Map.add layer helped me add these images. So I'm adding all these layers to my map output. This visualization parameter is just to show or just to specify what colors I want and what is the minimum maximum values that I want to show. So once I write this code and I click on run, if I show the map display, you will see it says that three layers have been added, and if I click on them one by one, it will get loaded. It will take some time. So you see this yellow bar is increasing. It is taking all that data for 15 days, averaging it for the entire world and showing it for the zoom area. Now if I zoom out, you will see you will see that it will again reload the entire data set for the whole region which is being shown. So all this is possible because of the power of Earth Engine, because of the power that Google servers are offering us. Okay, now uh, this is the roughly the nitrogen dioxide concentration over India in the first fortnight of April. This is when we were under major lockdown, and this only these areas which are thermal power plants were on, and they were emitting nitrogen dioxide. Come May, the lockdown is over. People have started going to work, and cars have started moving, factories have started, and you see that the nitrogen dioxide concentration over these areas, some areas in the south, have started increasing. And come June, uh, the economy is in full swing, and also the monsoon has started. So a lot of cloud is there in these areas. Observations cannot be taken, but you see relatively a lot of more nitrogen dioxide is being seen. So if I compare June with April, you can see the stark difference in increase in nitrogen dioxide concentration. Now, okay, so I can visualize this. Great. Now, how do I download it? Now, to download it, let us first see how we can upload our own study area. So, I want to upload a shape file for Delhi. So, you can take any shape file if you have. You can use Google Earth to create your own KML also. So, I am going to show you if I have a small shape file of just the roughly the Delhi boundary. Again, this is not the exact NCR or Delhi boundary. This is just a rough representation of that area. Now, if I how do I add this shapefile? It is in form of a shapefile. How do I add this shapefile to Earth Engine? So you go to assets, and then you click on new, and you say upload a shapefile. So you can see you can upload a TIFF file, you can upload a CSV. We are going to explore how to upload a shapefile. You click on this, you select your files, so let's say I say I am going to select my Delhi files. I click on open, I give a name, and then I click on upload. Okay, now for this session I have already uploaded it here. In my assets I already see Delhi listed. That means I have already added it to my Earth Engine. And if once you say upload, a task will be created to ingest the data. So you see in your task, an ingest table activity will start. It will take less than 1 minute if you have a single polygon or small shapefile, or it may take a few minutes if you have a bigger shapefile. Now let us see the code, how I can download this nitrogen data, nitrogen dioxide concentration data, over the study area. So I am whatever data I have added, I am importing it into my Earth Engine. I am calling it using a variable called ROI. and then I'm saying export image to drive. I'm only downloading currently the June 1st fortnight data, and I'm saying, giving the description. This is basically the file name, and the scale. This is important. This is in meters, the spatial resolution. Now this nitrogen dioxide data which is inserted in Earth Engine is at a spatial resolution of 0.01 degrees, which is approximately 1110 meters at equator, but we are roughly taking the scale, and then we specify which area which want to download this. So I'm specifying this variable called ROI that I have inserted my Delhi shapefile. So once I run it, I will see in my task that there is a task pending, okay, which says run. Now if I click on this run, it will say, okay, you are going to initiate an image export where you want to, what is the file name, and it will go directly to my Google Drive. Okay, so I have created a folder in my Google Drive where I am storing all this data. So once I click on run, it may take less than a minute to run and export this pollution data uh, for the Delhi region, and it will create a georeference TIFF file in my Google Drive directly. So this may take a few seconds, and we should see a file pop up here by the name NO2. Uh, in the meantime, I have already also added the ROI, the region of interest or the shapefile to Google Map and centered it using the center object command. So I see that New Delhi is added here, the shapefile, and that is being shown. Also, my existing layers are also there, so I can see the pollution data and the shapefile together. Similarly, if you have point data, let's say locations where some disease is spreading, that also you can upload and visualize the different layers like temperature, pollution, vegetation, AOD, whatever hypothesis you have regarding dependence of a disease on environmental variables or variables which can be captured by satellites can be viewed together on this. So you see now this process is complete. It turns blue. It says it took 28 seconds. And I see that there is a file NO2 which has been created on my Earth Engine, on my Google Drive. I just right click on it and say download. It will download this NO2 file, and I see it as a file in a GeoTIFF file in my drive. So I will open my GIS software and open this file there, and you can see I can add my data. I can take whichever coloring scheme I want, and I can visualize it in GIS also, and it is the georeference data. That is why these two files are overlapping each other. The data is georeferenced, and you don't have to further rectify it or correct it. So this is a way you can take any satellite based product for your and download it for your region using Earth Engine. The next thing that I want to show you is how to deal with uh, climatic data. Let's say we want to visualize air temperature over India. So I will uncomment this code. So what we are taking here is the NCEP NCAR reanalysis data. We are going to select the surface temperature, which is 2 meters above, or air temperature, which is 2 meters above the surface, and it is slightly less than the actual temperature that you feel here. So if you're feeling something like 30 degrees, then air temperature would be something like 28 or 25 degrees centigrade. Now this data is available in Kelvin, so you can make that appropriate correction. And so what I'm doing is I am selecting or filtering this data for the month of May. that is 1st May to 31st May. The start date is inclusive and the end date is exclusive. That means just the day before this date written here. And I'm filtering for the Delhi region. I am specifying what is my minimum maximum values and what colors I want to show the temperature data in. And then I add that layer, that data set. Now this is a 6 hourly data. That means in one day I will have 4 observations, and for 1 month that means 31 days, or let's say 30 days. So 4 observation, 120 observations I will have. How do I visualize it? I'm just saying this variable dot first. That means just show me the 00 UTC on 1st of May 2020 um, uh, temperature on the map. So when I run this, let me run this code and let's see what I get. So the Delhi shift file is added, and now I have my uh, 1st of May 2020 00 UTC temperature data added here. If I zoom out, then I can see it for the whole area. So all these data sets are global. Now, you would say, why are these appearing as squares? Because it's a coarse resolution data set. The spatial resolution is 2.5 degrees. 1 degree is about 111 kilometers. For easiness, let's say 100 kilometers. So 2.5 is 250 kilometers by 250 kilometers. One temperature point we have. So coarse resolution, but there are other data sets. You can explore that also. So this is how you can visualize your temperature, your precipitation, all these data sets along with. So my existing code is also there. So if I want to view my pollution along with uh, uh, along with the temperature data, that can also be done. So I have these opacity slide bars. I can slide these opacities. I am on the below. I am seeing the first fortnight of May nitrogen dioxide concentration, and on top I am seeing the 1st of May air temperature. So all these kinds of visualizations can be performed, but at the end of the day I would want the data to do my own analysis or want to do my own processing. So we would like to download it. So I showed you how to download for a given region. Now we will see how to download it uh, aggregated for that region. So basically, I want every 6 hours what is the temperature in entire Delhi, one averaged value. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to create a chart. This function is called series by region, where I specify the images, I specify my region of interest, I specify what kind of reducer or aggregation technique that I want, whether I want the maximum temperature in Delhi, whether I want the minimum or the mean temperature over Delhi. That is using this reducer. I specify what variable I want, what is the resolution. So this is basically 2.5 degrees in meters, and these are some other parameters that I need to specify. Once I click on run on this, you will see a chart should come on the console showing for the month of May every 6 hour the temperature in Delhi. So in the morning it will be less, in the afternoon it will go up, then in the evening night it will go down, and so on for every day for 30 days. You can change the date range and get even a larger graph. Graph is good. Where do I get the data? No problem. Just click on this icon, download CSV, and here you go. You have the data in Excel sheet on your own computer, and you can make your own graphs and do your own calculations. Okay, so this is what, and there is a lot more which Earth Engine can offer to you. This is just a very basic overview of some of the environmental parameters which probably affects public health. how to access them, how to visualize them, and how to download them. Now there is so much computing power available for users, so people are now moving on to things like doing machine learning on Earth Engine. There are a lot of supervised, unsupervised classifications, machine learning algorithms built in on Earth Engine. How to know about it, how to use them? You see this question mark on top right, you just click on it. There are three main places where you need to go to get more information about this. One is, the first thing is the user guide. Once you click on it, you will see a very good documentation on Earth Engine, on machine learning, how to view images, image collections, how to deal with features, reducers, joins, how to make different charts, and so on. If you think this is too exhaustive, you want it for specific purposes. Let's say you want to do some forest change or surface water change. There are different tutorials available. These contents, or this tool Earth Engine, is also being adopted by universities across the globe for their own curriculum, and that educational material is also available in this tab edu. So for example, the first one says this code is used in remote sensing class of geospatial analysis lab at University of San Francisco. It is available in different languages for different universities. For example, this is in Yale and NUS, and so on. Under this training resources tab, you will see more content. There is also one small content on public health, how somebody used this. Yeah, somebody in Columbia University used this to support public health trainings. Uh, uh, he used Earth Engine and the corresponding document files. So a lot of help is available on Earth Engine. The next place where you can go, if you once you start writing code, you will get some errors, you will come across some problems. The best place to get your problem solved is this Q&A site. It is basically the Stack Exchange site where questions tagged with Google Earth Engine get answered. So you can put your questions here and get them on and find solutions for it. And the third place is the developers discussion group. Here, all the people writing code on Earth Engine have posted their questions, so you can go there, search their questions, find out whether your question is answered, or find or uh, post your own question and get answers for it. So these are the helps available, and you can start working with Earth Engine for your specific application. These are the places where you can uh, click on sign up to use Earth Engine on this link. These slides are available on this link. The program that I showed can be downloaded from this link. And these are the three places that I showed you where you can go for help. That is the user guide, the Stack Exchange website, and the developers mailing list. So that is what I wanted to show in this discussion and demonstration. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. I would be happy to answer. Thank you very much.